Welcome to another episode of the Golden Moment podcast. My name's Mijo Biscan. Today we're having a conversation with Marty Brown. Marty is a long-time drummer of Melbourne band Art of Fighting. He is a producer, a mix engineer. He's an artist manager. He creates events and he runs his own recording studio. And I'm sure he does about 40 other things that I don't know about. But he's a very talented guy. He's been able to accomplish a lot of things in a lot of different areas. So he's an excellent person to talk to. We focused in this conversation mainly on the role of the producer. What does he do as a producer when he first hears a song? What's he really listening for? And how does he see his role between the artist and getting that music to the rest of the world? We also talked about branding for artists, why that's important and why most artists tend to forget about it or ignore it. We also talked about the importance of telling your story and how that really differentiates you as an artist, and a couple of core things to really focus your energy on if you want to move your creative career forward. So it's a really great conversation. Always love chatting to Marty. He's a very open, insightful, smart gentleman. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and I'll see you on the other side. So here we are with Marty Brown. Welcome to the podcast. Here is Mr. Marty Brown. Welcome, Marty.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Awesome to see you in the COVID days.
Exactly. Nice to see another thing I'm not related to. That's always excellent.
Yeah, exactly. So, I really wanted to chat to you and get you out into the open a little bit, because you play a behind-the-scenes role in a lot of parts of your life. Even being a drummer in an awesome band, you're still like in the shadows at the back. But yeah, but making so many things happen. A little bit of a puppet master. There's just like making all these things happen. So the way we know each other actually is probably something that could be interesting to talk about. We met in Germany. That was the first time I met you. So when someone called Claire Bowditch,
happens to be my wife.
Happens to be your wife, was on tour with Gautier, and my band Lamplight was on tour with Gautier. So I met Claire, and then I moved to Berlin, and you were based in Berlin at that time, and we started hanging out, and then we went on tour together.
That's right.
And then, that's it, really, isn't it? And then
that's pretty much how we met. I kind of remember that first gig that Gautier had in Berlin, and Claire had been coming home on every now and then, like the start of the weeks after, kind of doing shows on the weekend, and just kind of told me about this band and all these musicians and these enigmatic people that were in this band. So it was kind of, they're all in the one car and they're just driving around Europe. So it was kind of nice to see that all kind of come together on stage.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember if we chatted that night or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, definitely hung out in Berlin.
Yeah. And then and then we actually did some mentoring together. So you and Claire mentored me for a short period, music stuff, and then you came in swinging with all like the promo stuff and branding. Like, dude, you've got to sort out your brand. You got to think about this stuff, which was the first time I think I ever really consciously went through that process. And then when it came to make a record, I wrote some songs, got in touch with you, and then you helped to produce the record that I've recently released. And so that's one area I reckon would be really great to chat about. One of the roles you play is producer. So when you think about producing, or when someone comes to you early on in the process of making a record with a batch of songs, what's sort of your process? What goes through your mind when you're initially listening to those, probably demo recordings?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's interesting because I guess I've done it so long now that I kind of remember how it started in the beginning, like, whether I was much more determined, I've got to try and make this song sound like that, or it was more of a structured process. But very much these days, as soon as I hear a song, immediately I just kind of, it should be this straight away. Just kind of not quite see, but start imagining how it should take shape and where it can go. Things that react to me are kind of more emotional level aspects to a song, and just kind of how much heart it has, or where it could have that heart and that could be brought out more, or just excitement essentially is kind of also one of the things that I'm often looking for. And it's interesting that, well, I guess I'm used to quite often as well, that's when a songwriter sends me a song, it's often a phone recording that they've sat down and written the song, and it's right at that moment they've written it, or very close to. So that emotional connection to the song is right there straight away. And then often, it's like a year goes by before you start recording a song and you've kind of lost what that feeling was. But it's nice to, as part of my job, to get to hear that little kernel. And it could be just like the crappiest little iPhone recording. And if it's only often the songs that my wife Claire sends to me, this is a verse and a chorus that I wrote yesterday morning. And so you can go, oh, right, but this that amazing little turn of melody there and that phrase, and how can we then expand that out and kind of make it kind of fully realised? So, yeah, essentially it's very much an emotional response. Often I feel like it's adding excitement to recordings. I think lots of songwriters like things to develop very slowly and just kind of really kind of get to a point where it's exciting by the end. And normally I find my job is just like taking the excitement of the end, putting that at the start, and then going on from there. And that just makes something straight away having a little bit more zing. That's not always the case. There's kind of, you've got lots of songs that just very slowly develop. But I think just kind of getting some little kernel from the end and putting that at the front just always kind of helps. Telling people, I kind of know, just gives people a sense of, I know where this is going to go in the end. I kind of have a feeling this is going to move somewhere. And I can sit with it right moment at the moment because I know that this is going to land somewhere special. Apart from that kind of emotional response, I guess there's a lot to do with it with branding and marketing, and that's the job of a producer as well, just to kind of think about, all right, so this is music for this particular media outlet or this audience essentially. What does this audience like? And then what media outlets would that audience listen to? What can I do to help it give it its best chance on that media outlet? Just to help essentially the musician have a career. It's always important. And it's hard to predict, and you kind of just do your best, and no one really knows. I've worked with a stack of different A&R people over the years in lots of different guises, and I remember the first time that we signed with a major record label. We'd been releasing records, that we recorded in our bedroom by ourselves for quite a few years. And then we signed to a record label, and I'm like, I can't wait to actually hear and find out how to do it properly now. These people are, they're the world leaders. They're the experts in this country. And still it was just like, maybe that song, I don't know if it's going to work. Maybe this is, it's just everyone is just gets their emotional reaction to a song. They like it, and they kind of hope that everyone else will like it as well. But it's pretty hard to predict that stuff often.
It must have been reassuring in a way, like, we thought we had no idea, but they're just stabbing in the dark as well. So
everyone else has any idea whatsoever either. It is a bit reassuring. It took me a while to get my head around, and then actually no, it didn't really, because I was quite headstrong back in my 20s. So I'm like, no, this is going to be the single. This is how it's going to go.
Right.
I've had not so many fights with Claire, but possibly my other bands that I was a bit more democracy style bands. I was very stringent about how things should be done. And certainly with the record labels, I've always suggested very strongly, and I don't think I've never had any arguments with record labels either. They've always kind of like, let's go with that. So that's always been good.
Were you going to say something else?
No, you go.
All right. So I was going to sort of re-emphasize and come back to this idea of the producer role. It's kind of a bridge between the artist's vision and an audience, essentially. because I guess some artists have the knack of understanding maybe where their music fits into the world, or what radio station or publication might write about them, or their audience. They may know their audience and have a punk artist is a good example. Like they're probably pretty clear, like my audience, they're going to dress like this, they're going to go to these places or whatever. But do you find that artists tend to not really have much of an insight on that side? I mean, for me, that I still find that quite challenging, because I'm very focused on creating the thing I want to create and putting that into the world. And the thing I'm most interested in is that first part. And the other part is like, I don't know. And even if it's right in front of me, I'll be like, I don't know, maybe that person.
Yeah. No, what you're saying is completely right. It's like those very specific genres are much easier to market towards because, I mean, that's essentially kind of how music works. It's more that it's a signifier of tribe, and I think we'll discuss this possibly in our kind of those branding and marketing-ish kind of discussions. But it's not necessarily that people kind of need a cultural icon, and so they see an artist and they kind of go, all right, this person dresses like me, they do the same things as, interested in the same things I like, they're making music for me and my tribe. And so there's very specific aspects of that, punk being an excellent one, or metal, or surfer rock. As soon as you hear a surfer band, you kind of go, oh, that's a surfer band for the surfies, and all the surfies are listening to it.
Yeah. And they're all dressing like this, and this is what they do.
That's right. They're all got slightly long hair, a little bit of dreads, and the flannel shirt slightly open, and all that kind of stuff. And famously, like the Beach Boys never actually surfed, but they just styled themselves as a beach band, and all the surfers listened to them. That's just how it worked. For other artists, it's much harder to find that tribe, and so it takes longer, I think, in the end. Kind of a process of just narrowing down who those people are, what they relate to, kind of the stories you tell, and just like with anything, just after you've been doing it for years and years and years, you just kind of finally manage to find that little niche where your audience is. But just it does take a lot longer, I think, and a lot more very consistent, very just like constant work of just like always putting it out there, always putting it out there, always putting it out there. I think in terms of artists that producing themselves and knowing where they fit, I don't know. I'm trying to think I think most people have a generally good sense of that I've worked with, I feel like. Every now and then you kind of often find songwriters that will write a song and kind of go, oh, this is a great little pop song, we should try and sell this to Taylor Swift. But there's like 3 minutes of like acoustic guitar noodlings at the start of it,
Right.
So sometimes I kind of find what people think of genres as kind of not very accurate. And I think in terms of singers, I often find that drummers are producers in a band, or the drummer ends up becoming a producer, probably because they don't have so much of a role. Like, it's pretty easy to play drums, let's be honest. It doesn't take that hard.
Don't tell.
And so if you're involved in music, you want to kind of do more. And so that's how I found it. It's like, all right, we've played drums. I want to record stuff. So, set up stuff with cassette, those old 70s cassette recorders, and with my first little garage bands when I was a teenager. So I did that. It's like, now we've got to try and get gigs. And how do we do that? And then just kind of end up taking on more and more of those roles because, singer-songwriters were spending their time singing and songwriting, and that's a very important aspect. But when it comes to production, I feel like it's not always the case, obviously, but that singers usually want to hear their voice the most. It's like if I can't hear the voice just like over absolutely everything, then something is wrong with this production. And drummers are much more worried about, but just have a sense of, is the groove actually working in this song? Like, is the beat? Am I feeling that come through the speakers? Because I know what it should feel like in my body. And so if I'm not actually hearing that come back to me, then there's something wrong. And then, often drummers will, especially kind of the better studio session drummers, will just have vocals, maybe a click track, and that's about it. Like, we're not necessarily listening to what the guitarist and all the other stuff is doing. Just kind of focus on, keep it in time, but, how can I flow with the vocal to make this song work? Yeah. But I feel like lots of singers don't necessarily worry too much about what the groove or the drums are doing. They're just like, can you hear perfectly?
Yeah.
Which is
my precious musings, all this wisdom that I'm imparting to the world.
Yes, exactly. No.
Turn that up. I don't even know why I got a band.
Just stinking the whole thing up every now and then.
Yeah.
Well, my wife has a good phrase that every now and then when I just go a little bit too crazy with the instrumentation, it's like, why are you jizzing just all over my song? I've got this beautiful, simple song. You are just coming over and just wanking over the whole top of it. It's just like, just cut the crap out and just keep it nice and simple. And when she says, I'd argue with such a position, really.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm realizing something interesting. So you obviously produced the record, you mixed the record, you helped with a lot of the arrangements and the songwriting on the record. Callum Barter, who engineered the record, is a drummer. Adam Dempsey, who mastered the record, is a drummer. And so the three really important roles of getting this, the songs really tightly, packaged up from beginning to end. I hadn't made that connection before. And also a really important part of the record that I made was the drums. Like, that was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about as far as who to get to be a part of that, because although I want to hear myself, the drums are such an important part. Maybe it's just my style of music is just the rhythmic aspects of it are so important, and the intensity, because drums have such a huge dynamic range to kind of lift songs as well.
Yeah, Danny was such a great choice, actually, just because there is that huge range of just like the most subtle, just little lullaby moments where he's still playing, but it's just kind of keeping the energy along. And that's, it's such a hard thing as a drummer to do that. Not many drummers are that good at it. But he can do that. It's like barely playing, but still you just kind of feel that momentum just kind of pushing it on. And then, the big explosions or songs that just kind of start thumping away straight away. So, it's a great choice.
Yeah. So maybe moving between some of the production and mixing stuff. So you were saying when you hear a song, one of the filters essentially initially is the heart of the song. Like, do I feel something from this? And you started mentioning sort of excitement, like we need to find a way of creating exciting moments in the song or something engaging or whatever. So I guess that a part of your brain is already being future focused, like, okay, when people hear this, it needs to grab them. So when you start thinking about that, the bridge going into the future life of this song, what other kind of filters are you using? I'm guessing back in the day there used to be a filter that every producer in Australia had, which was, is this going to be played on Triple J? That filter kind of is not so prevalent anymore. Well, I guess probably in our demographic, but are there other filters now that sort of play a role in those types of decisions?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I quite like working on albums still, and it'll be sad if that, completely goes. I think everyone's still kind of down with albums for the moment. At least artists are. I'm not sure that people are listening to them like this. But I guess, and so it helps when there's an album and then you can put a filter over a whole group of songs, as opposed to having to say, oh, every song has to fit onto this radio station or whatever it might be. So, you know, we can get a song like we've got the numbers and kind of go, oh, this is going to bang straight away. This will be an up-tempo song. So this is the one that'll be 3.5 minutes and, you know, it'll thump straight away and it'll be exciting, an up-tempo thing, which, you know, just as it happens, most people just respond to it really. So it's just got a bit more of a chance of kind of getting out there. But then obviously when you're doing a whole album, you don't want every song to be like that. So it's just lovely to be able to say, well, we're not going to do that to other songs. We're going to really let this one be 7.5 minutes because we've already got those couple of songs. And so now we can let this one develop. And so I really like that aspect. And I've always done that though. I've always taken, especially with Claire's songs, and especially 20 years or so ago when we were thinking, okay, we want to try and get on Triple J because that seems to be the way to have a career in this country at the moment. But there was always a couple of songs. So she would just write her songs and they would be a verse and chorus. It's like, oh, this one is quite poppy. I can't imagine this actually turning into a single. So this will get a single treatment. But this one, this has got a much longer story to tell. So let's develop it out and see where it goes. Other filter, I'm trying to think if there's other filters other than that. I think just kind of trying to use as many different magical moments as possible. And I think that's one of the phrases that we talked about a lot, just those little pauses and those little magical moments coming in, and then just, you know, whether it's splitting out the guitars, we did quite a lot, just kind of going, oh, now it's going to come down to this little tiny mono moment and then kind of spread out. And I think we drew lots of visual diagrams, didn't we, of like, this is what this song is going to look like in terms of the frequencies up here and down here. And, you know, this part will be, you know, kind of tight like a tree trunk, and the roots of the bass will be kind of, you know, down out there. And so that was kind of a nice process. That was lovely to be able to not have to worry about setting up mics and, you know, capturing the sounds. Like Callum take ample care of that and just for me just to be able to sit back and go, sir, what's this song about? Just chew the fat about a song and, you know, how we can make that express itself the best it possibly could.
Yeah. When I spoke to Callum, he said a similar thing. He was like, it's so great having Marty there because I could just focus on, you know, setting up the microphones and getting, you know, the best sounds or whatever. It is really like we each just have a certain level of bandwidth, you know, just mental bandwidth. Like it's very difficult to. So in that role in the studio, you were able to really just be like, you know, a Zen producer, just like kicking back, just listening to the songs, and focus in on that to be able to give really clear feedback. And
I think more than usual, because I guess in the olden days when people were spending, you know, millions of dollars on records and, you know, you'd just be in there for days and days. Like I was reading an article the other day about the Stone Roses Fool's Gold, which is such an amazing recording and sounds great still, you know, 20-something years later. And I still use it as a reference every now and then when I'm doing something in that vein. So I wonder if there's something online about how they recorded that. And it took them 19 days. It took them one day just to get the bass sound. They're just like moving the mic around a bass cabinet for a day. It's like how stoked to be to find that, keep that entertaining essentially. But, you know, the results are pretty good. But yeah, people don't have those kinds of budgets anymore. So while I still have kind of, you know, other people that are in my studio, I still have quick discussions about what songs are about, how best we can do that. And I've certainly always got ideas in my mind that I'm just pushing out there. It was nice to have that extra little bit of space just while Callum's or everyone else is working on practicing something else, that we could kind of, you know, have those conversations. And I guess one of the other big aspect apart from those two things for a producer is the performance good? And I think that's why the drummers kind of work well as producers as well, because they can rate other drummers and grooves. And if something's tight enough, and, you know, is the guitarist playing tight enough to the drummer, it does that sound right. And if it's loose, is it loose in a good way, or is it loose in a bad way? Where often singers, especially if they're not instrumentalists at all, probably don't have my head around very much. And so, yeah, it's nice, again, with your recording, just to have that space to just be able to really kind of focus, talk to the other instrumentalists and kind of, try and get the best out of them at the same time while comes organising things or whatever.
Yeah, cool. There's another interesting concept we talked about, which I felt really is a useful thing, and I've thought about it since, which is contrast. So you talked about, and it's once you said it, it became like, oh, that's so obvious to think about contrast. But even if I'm in the past writing a song, I'm not really thinking about contrast. I'm thinking about, I don't know, just getting the emotional thing out or whatever. But in the production thing, it's so powerful. So, it's so obvious with, quiet verses and then big chorus, but there was contrast in many other ways, like panning and stuff like that. Do you want to talk about a couple of the idea of contrast and a few ways that you can achieve it?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you don't necessarily have to always use contrast. Like, it's not like the only way to approach producing a song, I guess. But I think for a singer-songwriter, it's quite nice, and it's certainly one of the ways to help kind of create those magical moments that we were talking about. Because just the way the human brain is structured, essentially, we're quite used to just zoning out of sounds that are constant, and it's only until we hear something that's new, that changes, that our hearing just peaks to that, and that's just from evolution, essentially, of being out in the forest and kind of like, oh, there's just the buzz of the bees or whatever, but right, there's a line, I better focus my attention there. So and you kind of see that. I think we possibly talked about it, and I think we did use it as well, and just in terms of vocal ranges going higher. And so, you had a few melodies that were like, that's a kind of pretty steady melody over that section. It's like, let's change that up a little bit by cranking up the pitch here. I can't remember if we went up to like a whole octave jump, which is like classic pop writing techniques, just because it just hits an emotional spot in listeners' brains straight away. But we certainly we're going to ramp it up here, so let's kind of get up a third from there, let's get up a sixth from there, and just see how that works. And I think that was my homework for me from memory, that I was like, what else can we come up with here? Just like, take this section away and just like see if we can crank up the pitch and the emotional content from it a little. So that's kind of one of the big aspects of change. Obviously, that big chorus kind of coming in, that's been a classic pop structure for years. And I think we were doing it much more subtly as well. So just with going from piano-based sections to acoustic guitar-based sections to electric guitars coming in. And we changed let's play this on acoustic guitar here, but this section actually be, we could have played the whole thing on acoustic guitar. It would have been quite like, let's actually just bring in electric guitars here to replace that instead, and go from that mono acoustic guitar to pan electric guitars, and it'll just feel like the world is expanding out. Yeah, it was kind of a nice feeling. And certainly when you listen back to your record, you kind of really feel that turning a corner and go, there's another whole vista over here, and there's a nice little universe over here. And
it definitely adds legs to a song or a record for re-listens, basically, I think, rather than here's the tone of this song, and it's just going to be that for 4.5 minutes or whatever. And then, creating, I suppose, dynamic, interesting, landscapes to go through. Yeah. Awesome. This is great stuff. And so one of the roles that you have been doing for a while, which is kind of managing or being involved in management with Claire, is taking on some new management roles. So I'm sort of thinking about the industry has changed so much. What are some of the things that that when you're working with people are a priority for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It has changed a lot, and I feel like with Claire, just because we haven't released an album in 7 or so years, that I had felt like I'd been outside of the music industry for a while, still playing gigs and, just kind of doing all those kind of aspects. But in terms of releasing a record, and now obviously the streaming thing is such a massive, or is the game essentially now, that I hadn't quite got my head around it yet. So it's been an interesting year over the last 12 months of getting new management clients, and then and Claire releasing a couple of songs as well. It's like, all right, streaming. All right, how does this work? Let me find out how this little caper works. And it seemed very promising. I think when we were gearing up to release Claire's song this time last year, that our record company was like, oh, it's so great. You don't have to write singles anymore. Play me your folky track, and we can get that on some Nordic folk playlist over in Sweden, or we don't have to worry about just singles anymore. We can just find the right spots for them. I'm like, oh, this sounds amazing. This sounds like I've been waiting for this day where I can just kind of do music we want, and then just find its home. And I've been seeing artists like Olafur Arnalds come over. It was like an Icelandic minimalist piano composer, and huge amounts of streams on Spotify. It's like, oh, he's found his audience and he's like doing this music that doesn't get played on radio. And he came over to Melbourne and played 3 sold-out recital centre shows. And it's like, oh, how did these people find out about him? It's like, oh, this is an amazing moment in history. And so over the last year, I found, as I've released things, expecting it to go somewhat like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, right, this is really it's disappointing for a start. Surprising. So I've just actually had a song that one of my artists has released over the last 2 weeks. And rather than handballing that on to a record company or a digital distribution company to do and do the playlist pitching and all that kind of stuff, I thought I would do it myself, just to kind of get my hand around it and try and work out how this new system works. And it's been complicated and hard, and butting my head up against an algorithm has been kind of a weird process. I did a lot of maths at school and uni. It's like, oh, right, I thought that was very distincting to my music life, but apparently that is not the case anymore. So algorithm seems to be like the new thing. Yes, which is disappointing to say the least. But yeah, so it's been interesting to try and get my head around that. I'm kind of learning a lot, and I'm looking forward to, once I've nutted it out, we'll have a chat.
Yeah.
I'll let you know what I find out.
Yeah, we'll do part 2 of this.
Exactly, that's right. But the reason I say that is that, weirdly, and I've been thinking about this a lot over the last week or so, 2 weeks, is that essentially the music industry and all of these arts industries are the same. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about finding your tribe, is that people just want to listen to something exciting. Like, no one wants to kind of go, no one says, oh, I listen to bad music. They want to listen to good music, someone that they admire and that they find interesting, and that they feel compelled that they need to listen to this person. And so it's still just about being a cultural figure that people want to find out what you're on about. And so essentially it has always been, no matter what the format is, whether it's vinyl or Spotify or, whatever else it's been over the last thousands of years, it's just about being that kind of person that people are interested in. And that's what kind of makes a career happen, essentially, and people come on board. Yeah. So it's still kind of, how can I present my artist in the best possible light, or convince this gatekeeper, or kind of show this person that my artist has a tribe and people are interested in it, and how can I get it out to other people that might want to join that group as well. And so it's an interesting prospect, and I think that's also relates back to what I was saying, is that most of it is just consistent work. So really you don't have to think about gatekeepers so much. You just have to kind of get it out there and just find those people, even if it is just that, as Claire and I did at the very beginning of her career, just collect the 100 emails from the people that were at the Empress. Mm-hmm. And that's, I feel like that's what I'm doing with Spotify now. I'm collecting like the emails like one by one.
Yeah.
And it's like a glorious, hard process, and like I'm too old for this shit, essentially. But that's kind of how it goes. So it's like setting people up. Like, sorry, if you still keep doing your work and it's interesting work and people find it compelling, then you're going to find that audience no matter what. And you should know kind of straight away. Like, I kind of felt in between. I still have an interesting career aspect with music. So I joined this like garage rock band when I was 15, 16. First band, I'd only been playing drums for like a year and a half, and in this kind of pre-grunge-ish garage rock band that kind of played punk.
Art of Fighting?
No, this is a band called the Ghoulies. Like I was like 14, 15. This is young at school. This scary punk guy said, "Oh, you play drums, you got to join our fucking band." I'm like, okay. I was like a small, tiny 14-year-old. And yeah, it was just one of those bands that there was something about it that it just... people came to see it all the time, just all the kids that were into grunge. Like, and we're out in Croydon, which is it's like a great little grunge hotspot of the 90s. On these kind of Battle of the Bands competitions against, bands that were much more polished, but there was just something about that little unique thing that kind of really worked and people really liked, and support Cosmic Psychos, and we're playing at the Art House when we were 15. And but we didn't really know that we just assumed all bands were like that. So then when that band died after a year and a half, and then I joined like a steady stream of other bands during high school, there was just never any reaction. Like, people didn't come and see those bands. It was always like dragging your friends there, and just always an uphill battle. And I had that until I met Claire again and we started doing gigs, and then suddenly there was just like people kind of flocking. And I just assumed they were her friends for a while until I realised that she didn't know anyone there either. It's just this particular vibe that people were into. So I think you should be able to find out if you're trying to create something, if it's an uphill battle, then you possibly know that it's going to be an uphill battle for a long period of time, and then it's probably not a bad idea to start changing things around. To kind of, or just imagine what you can do to try and make it something that people are so engaged with. And as soon as you do that, then people just jump on board. And you can't hear those stories about all that, the great, like John Butler was kind of famous around Fremantle for busking stories. There's lots of new versions of that, Tash Sultana, etc. That people were just like saw this person and were just like, "Oh, this is amazing! I've got to find out who this person is and buy their cassette." And so when there's a reaction to that straight away, people just end up jumping on board. Yeah, cool. So I guess while management has changed and all of the technology is now completely different, just creating that is still what it's all about. Yeah.
And so that'll be in part 2 as well, is exactly, you're going to reveal the X factor that you can identify immediately, so you can, either ditch it or move on.
Well, I think everyone can identify it straight away, I reckon. I mean, there's subtle versions of it, I think. Like, I remember I've seen some artists that were like in year 10 and doing, like, I did like a school tour and saw an artist who was in year 9 or year 10. It's like, "Oh, this is Greta, she's doing a song," does it. And it's like, "Oh, that was amazing. That was fantastic." And then it wasn't until 5 years later, she gets played on Triple J and is touring around with Mumford & Sons. I'm like, "Oh, right. I should have probably picked that. I shouldn't have just said, 'Oh, she's amazing.'" At that age, I probably should have, said, "Oh, right, this person's going to go somewhere," because I can see it straight away. Awesome. But I think everyone, when, like Teskey Brothers is a great example these days. It was an excellent example that as soon as someone saw it, you just kind of go, "Oh, that person's amazing." And soon as people have those kind of reactions, then it's going to be a go up, whether they're playing to 50 people or more. Yeah.
So, so talking about streaming is sort of something that's obviously very different that's happening in the music industry from years past. And then you kind of mentioned a couple of things that don't change or that are still the same or whatever. So it was funny. I wrote down a little note as you were talking, which was find your audience and connect with them one by one. And then you kind of talked about that. Essentially, it's, finding where these people are, and there's not, unless there's just a, out of the blue hit song that just resonates across the entire globe, crosses cultural borders or whatever.
We're that lucky.
That there aren't that many shortcuts to it. And that's sort of something I realized in the year sort of leading up to releasing my record was I went to a couple of different, music industry conferences, and I saw you at one of them, trying to get the lay of the land. And the best thing and the most frustrating thing was after going to a few of them, I was like, oh, okay, you've got to make good music, music that you like. You've got to do it. You've got to do that part really well. And then you have to just go about connecting it with an audience and just build it one by one. There aren't that many shortcuts other than, just write a hit song, but there's not much of a guarantee of doing that. And so there was another aspect you mentioned that sort of differentiates people, I suppose, is essentially what I was hearing was like story, like whether you're pitching to a playlist and saying, oh, well, this is the story of my artist and why you should care. Something you're involved in is called Story Baker, which maybe you can tell us the story of Story Baker, and just how important the story is, and building that narrative or whatever, and what are some important elements of that, and how do you do that?
Yeah, no, it's actually extremely important, possibly the most important thing, and I don't get to do it every time. There's lots of different projects that I'm involved in. Sometimes it works, and obviously it's so much easier when there is like the story is natural and it's there. It's like, oh, this is a reaction to this, and it's like, this is the story of that, and then you can just kind of go, that's your press release, and then that's out there, and people can either react to that in any way they want. That'll find its audience, I guess. It's much harder when you're kind of like, oh, I'm in this band, or, this democracy band, and we've all just kind of written some songs, and none of them are really related to anything else, and we don't even know kind of where we fit really in this, and that's really hard to kind of come up with a story. That's when, at that point, I guess that's just when it helps to be young and, be a cool band that's, just gets played on Triple J, and, kind of read their press releases, and there's nothing particularly exciting going on there for the likes of us anyway. But yeah, I think especially the story gets more and more important as you get older. So how to construct it is quite hard, but I think, obviously it needs to be natural. It needs to be kind of who you are. But I think having it in the back of your mind, it's like, oh, what is the key that people will recognise straight away and hopefully connect, and they'll kind of, people will decide whether they like something sooner or later, but at least pique their interest enough to kind of give it a few seconds of their time to find out if they might like it or not. So yeah, there can be anything, obviously. It just needs to be kind of a particularly interesting, and it doesn't need to be new. Like, obviously there's not much new under the sun. There's like some kind of twist of events that just might just kind of shapes everything, and everyone's like, oh, right, I know what that person's talking about, and I've had that feeling too. Maybe this is a song for me. Maybe this is that person that is part of my tribe, so I'll give them a go.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of examples. I guess when I think about stories that surround different albums, like the one that came to mind was the album that Beck came out with, Sea Change, which was like a breakup album. So that's like, I suppose, the story of that album at that time. And then there's the one everyone knows of Bon Iver, went into the woods and howled into microphones and created this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So I guess it doesn't have to be, crazily ornate or super special. It just has to describe the events around the making of the album, I suppose. Is that fair enough, or do you think it does have to have some other kind of narrative to it that people can attach to emotionally?
No, I think maybe I'm not sure what I think in terms of those two different things and whether they are in fact different. Like a good example that I've done in the last kind of year and a half is Claire's song "Woman," which is just like a call to arms and girlfriend, I've got your back. Let's stick it together. But she just came up with a press release. I mean, Claire's such a great writer that normally I would ask her to write press releases because she just has such a way with words. She knows exactly what the song's about, but then also just has such a great way of framing the conversation that it resonates with her gang. So she framed that press release as saying, it was a horrible Tuesday night. It had this kind of trouble, that kind of trouble. I went out with my mates and we all spoke about our kind of, troubles that we've been having that week. And I came home so refreshed that of the power of having my mates around me and what a special thing that is and so different compared to, family life and boyfriends and kind of other friends or colleagues. These girlfriends I've had now for 20 years and that and as soon as I came home, I kind of, even though it was like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, all the kids were asleep, I still had to sit down at the piano and just kind of let out that feeling go of just, how much I loved having girlfriends and how much they supported me. And that was essentially the press release. And that was great just because I think everyone could just kind of really relate to that feeling of having that support with their mates, either women or female, really. So it's a great way of framing that conversation rather than saying, I wrote a song about women's power, and just was great key to that.
Yeah, great. Yeah. That's such a good example because it really does resonate on just a very human level. And even as you were telling that, weirdly, I got goosebumps like in my head just because of the narrative. Like I was immediately seeing, the images of Claire out with friends and the power of that. And maybe because we're all in isolation and be a good time to re-release that press release now. Like it's about human connection, I suppose. That's so powerful compared to I wrote a song or here's another song. Because I suppose one of the things that artists fall into, and, I do, is the song should stand on its own 2 feet. And I'm going to put it out and let destiny, usher it into the ears of all the people that need to hear it or whatever the mythology around songwriting is. But that example there just, in my own mind, created such a strong contrast between, okay, if I heard that, I'd really want to hear the song actually. After this, I'm going to go listen to the song. Like just having a new lens to engage with it with is very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It took me a long time to learn that as well. So I remember writing early press releases and kind of talking about it was recorded on a tape machine. And I remember someone at our first record company going, no one gives a shit what it was recorded on, all right? Just take that out of the press release and just talk about what the songs are about and, how that's going to emotionally connect with people. It's like, but I give a shit. It's like, tape machine. It sounds awesome. It took me a long time to learn those lessons as well. And, I still have times where stuff gets released where I can't kind of convince other people involved or I still can't find what that little twist is. And so you do let it out. But then it's not just kind of having that twist. It's then making sure you push it out for, spending the hour each day just kind of, who else can I email today to try and get this song out into the world? Because, it's very repetitive. Even with something like that, hopefully if you have an interesting press release, it will get picked up by more media sources. But then, it's still just getting it to them and pushing it out to them. I remember who was it? I think it was the editor of Frankie magazine at the time saying, speaking at a conference that we ran about creatives making a career out of their creative life. And she's saying when you write a press release, it has to be, you think of the media as like monkeys and you're giving them bananas, but not even bananas with skins. You're giving them like the mashed up banana already there with a spoon in the side. And just, you have to be able to just, so they can just kind of go, that's a really easy option. I can put that in my magazine in like 5 seconds time. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing you're kind of looking at giving them essentially. So if they get a press release like that, they're going to go, all right, that's absolutely done straight away, and in it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to make it really easy for them because they're human beings who also want to go home at 5 and do other things as much as they love it. So
that's right. They want to look good, so you're trying to make them look good. Same with grants companies, same with everyone. You're just trying to make them look good. It's like, oh, you got on board on this thing. That's what Claire says all the time. You got on board with this thing. I'm going to make you look good because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, again, also with the audience in mind. So, as a musician, and again, so this brings it around really nicely to the role that you've played of that bridge, is really helping artists to see what they do from the perspective of everyone else that actually is going to connect with it. And I think that, that's a great skill to develop.
Yeah, well, I guess it's from necessity because I just wanted to play drums more. So, that's how I get the drums.
Cool. Well, is there anything that you're working on that you want to share anything about, or is there anywhere you want to direct people to go find out more about what you do?
Sure. So the song I've just released recently was by Harry James Angus, who you probably know as the trumpet player from the Cat Empire. Yeah. So I've just been teaching his solo stuff for the last year, which is excellent because he's a genius. So it's kind of one of those great things where you're just going to go do your genius stuff and I'll just get it out there. And it's like, the hard part is that it's lots of different genres. So that's what makes my job trickier.
Right.
And as I was saying before, if it's one little genre, then it's kind of easy to find your tribe. But Harry's just, you won't be bound by such things.
Yes. He's got a lot of talent that punches through. Amazing vocalist, amazing
vocalist, yeah. Amazing arranger, amazing band leader. I've been really enjoying watching the band. They're all just amazing in themselves. But just the way you can kind of go, oh, right, there's that amazing singer over there. I'm going to get her to come up and do a scat solo at Woodford Folk Festival, and no one exactly knows what's going to happen. Like, this has barely been rehearsed at all, just like a vague kind of thing, and just, he's able to just conduct all these great musicians on stage right then and there. Yeah. So, it's pretty easy in that way. We just released a song called Old Fashioned Mayhem, and which he's had floating around for a long time, and we finally just kind of, it's great songs, up-tempo songs, like, oh, this is going to be a good song for, I end up getting kind of rotation on Double J, which is great. And we were like, oh, right, the pandemic's hit, how are we going to release it? And it's like, I think I was kind of just feeling, especially because this is the start of May, if we release something and we don't talk about the pandemic in some kind of way, it feel really tone deaf. So I think the way that it's kind of like, the way that this song connects with now is that it's called Old Fashioned Mayhem, and it's just it's a lot about lots of different things, but just that feeling of, kind of going out at night and just, anything could happen, and the craziness that can just pop up out of nowhere. And it's like, yeah, I'd like some of that Old Fashioned Mayhem back again right about now.
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of did that press release for that song.
Cool, great.
Kind of just on that.
Another good example of the story. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, being, I don't know, having a time of my life where I invited mayhem into my world so often and then figured out how to remove as much chaos as possible, to now getting back into a place of like, some old-fashioned mayhem would be kind of sweet right now.
Yeah, that's right. Finding balance is the important thing. Most things in that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks heaps, Marty. It's been awesome. And maybe we'll do it again on the other end of this pandemic. We'll go to part 2. We'll go a bit deeper. Yeah, but thanks for all your insights.
No worries. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to Marty for an awesome conversation around producing, storytelling, production ideas, branding. He knows so much. So if you want to make contact with Marty, you can find a link in the description below this podcast. While you're there, you'll also find a link to download 3 free songs from my latest album, Golden Moment, and they will get ushered to your inbox. You will also find the ability to get a limited edition signed copy of my latest album while there are any left. So I invite you to go and check that out. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're watching it. Like it, give it a thumbs up, and give it a review on Stitcher or iTunes or wherever you're listening to it. And please join the conversation by leaving me a comment below or shooting me an email at mio@mijobiscan.com, and love to keep the conversation going. So let me know, what were your favorite parts? What did you get out of this? Any other thoughts you'd like to share? I'd love to hear from you. So thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.